You ever sit back, staring at the ceiling late at night and wonder why your mind just won't stop moving? Why you keep questioning things that everybody else seems fine just accepting? That's the mark of a deep thinker, a mind that refuses to live on autopilot. While most people are satisfied floating on the surface, deep thinkers dive beneath it. They don't just want to exist, they want to understand. They're the ones who look at the world and see layers that others miss. The silence between the noise, the meaning behind the chaos, the truth hiding inside contradiction. See, a deep thinker isn't someone who just spends time in their head. It's someone who uses that time to build something real. They feel more, they see more, and sometimes they even hurt more. But that's the trade-off for seeing life in high definition. Their thoughts that don't trap them, they teach them. Their solitude doesn't isolate them, it refines them. So today, we're not just talking about intelligence or imagination. We're talking about the psychology of depth, what drives the people who think differently, move intentionally, and live with purpose when the rest of the world is still just trying to keep up. Heightened self-awareness is the inner foundation of every deep thinker. It's that constant state of being tuned in, not just to the outer world, but to the frequencies of your own thoughts, emotions, and motives. It's a kind of mental mirror that never turns off. When someone truly understands themselves, they start to move differently. They don't just react to the world, they respond with intention. Their awareness gives them clarity about who they are and why they do what they do, and that clarity is rare in a world that teaches most people to just go with the flow. Deep thinkers don't drift, they navigate. The psychology behind self-awareness is complex but powerful. It's the ability to step outside of yourself and observe your own mind like you're watching a movie. Most people get caught up in the scenes. They're too busy acting to notice the script. But deep thinkers pause the film. They analyze the storyline, question their role, and rewrite their lines if they have to. That's what makes them different. They don't just experience life. They interpret it, dissect it, and rebuild it in ways that align with their values and truths. This awareness becomes a compass. It doesn't always show the easiest route, but it always points toward authenticity. When someone becomes that aware of their own thoughts, they start to understand the difference between emotion and identity. They might feel anger, sadness, jealousy, or joy, but they recognize those feelings as passing weather, not permanent conditions. Most people get lost in their emotions. They think being angry means they are anger, or feeling doubt means they are weak. But deep thinkers learn to observe those emotions without letting them define them. They understand that awareness creates space, and that space gives them control. Instead of being swept up by emotion, they use it as data, information that tells them what needs attention, healing, or change. This level of awareness often develops from pain or struggle. Deep thinkers rarely become that introspective by accident. They've faced moments that forced them inward, heartbreaks, failures, betrayals, or long nights of questioning everything. They've had to confront their own contradictions and flaws. They've had to sit with their own silence until it started speaking back. That process, while uncomfortable, is transformative. It turns pain into perspective. Once someone learns to watch their own reactions instead of just living inside them, they start to see patterns in how they think, how they respond to stress, how they seek validation, or how they sabotage their own peace. Awareness breaks those cycles by shining light on them. Deep thinkers carry this awareness into their interactions with others because they're constantly analyzing their own motives. They become more empathetic toward the motives of others. They recognize that people act from pain, fear, and insecurity just as much as from love or ambition. They stop taking everything personally. Instead, they start seeing behavior as communication, even when that communication is unhealthy. This shift gives them emotional intelligence. They can sense when someone's energy is off, when words don't match intentions, or when silence says more than sound. That insight makes them powerful in relationships, leadership, and creativity, but it also isolates them sometimes. Being that self-aware isn't always comfortable. When you can see through your own patterns, it becomes hard to ignore them. You catch yourself in the act, lying to yourself, procrastinating, chasing validation, playing small, and you can't pretend you don't notice. That level of accountability can be heavy. Deep thinkers often wrestle with self-criticism because awareness brings truth, and truth isn't always pretty. But that same discomfort becomes their teacher. They learn to move with more honesty. They don't run from their flaws. They study them. They understand that growth starts where denial ends. This kind of internal awareness also changes how they approach success. They stop chasing surface validation, the likes, the approval, the applause, because they know those things are temporary highs. Instead, they chase internal alignment. They measure success by peace of mind, consistency, and purpose. They ask themselves whether what they're doing feeds their soul or just feeds their ego. And when they recognize they're being driven by ego, they pull back and recalibrate. That's why many deep thinkers move differently in a material world. They can play the game, but they're not defined by it. They operate with intention instead of impulse. Another layer of heightened self-awareness is understanding one's own energy. Deep thinkers are sensitive to environments, to people's vibes, to the energy of a room. They can feel when something isn't right, even when no words are spoken. That sensitivity can make them seem quiet or distant at times, but it's not detachment, it's protection. They guard their peace like it's sacred because they know how easily external chaos can cloud internal clarity. They learn to choose solitude over noise, reflection over reaction. They use isolation not as escape, but as maintenance. Their time alone is where they check their alignment, recharge their creativity, and rebuild their mental structure. This awareness also brings a sense of humility. The more a person understands themselves, the more they realize how little they truly know. They become open-minded, willing to question everything, even their own beliefs. They don't cling to certainty because they understand that growth requires change. That humility doesn't make them weak, it makes them adaptable. It keeps them learning, evolving, and expanding their consciousness. Deep thinkers don't need to be right all the time, they just need to be real. When you live with that much awareness, the world slows down in a way. You start noticing details, the tone behind someone's words, the pattern in your daily habits, the thoughts that repeat in your head when nobody's watching. Awareness turns life into a series of lessons. Every interaction, every setback, every emotion becomes data. You start understanding that your mind is the filter that shapes your entire experience. Change the filter and you change your life. That's why deep thinkers spend so much time in reflection, because they know self-awareness isn't just about knowing who you are, it's about constantly rediscovering who you can become. This kind of awareness is both a gift and a burden. It brings peace, but also responsibility. Once you truly see yourself, you can't unsee. You can't go back to ignorance, can't blame others for your patterns, can't hide behind excuses. You become accountable for your energy, your reactions, your growth. That accountability might feel heavy, but it's also liberating. Because when you understand yourself, you gain power, not over others, but over your own reality. You start to move through life with intention, confidence, and calm. And that's the silent mark of a deep thinker, not that they know everything, but that they know themselves. There's a fine line between overthinking and deep thinking, and the difference lies in direction. One goes in circles, the other goes deeper. Overthinking is like being trapped in a maze of your own thoughts. You keep hitting the same walls, replaying the same scenes, asking questions that lead nowhere. Deep thinking, on the other hand, is exploration with purpose. It's diving beneath the surface to understand why something is the way it is, not just to relive it. Both come from the same mental energy, but one drains you while the other refines you. The psychology behind this difference is rooted in awareness, emotional control, and purpose. When someone overthinks, their thoughts are driven by fear, doubt, or uncertainty. They replay events in their mind, searching for safety in a world that rarely gives guarantees. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to control what it can't. It's driven by anxiety, the need to predict outcomes, prevent pain, and fix the unfixable. It's the brain stuck in protection mode, scanning every possibility to avoid regret. Deep thinking, however, doesn't come from fear, it comes from curiosity. It's a form of intellectual and emotional courage, a willingness to confront complexity instead of avoiding it. Deep thinkers aren't trying to control the outcome, they're trying to understand the process. They ask questions not to find a guarantee, but to find meaning. In psychology, overthinking is often linked to rumination, the repetitive, unproductive focus on problems or mistakes. It creates stress, indecision, and paralysis. The person feels like they're solving something, but they're actually reinforcing the same emotional patterns. Deep thinking, on the other hand, activates metacognition, thinking about thinking. It's reflective instead of reactive. Deep thinkers can step back and examine their thoughts from a distance. They don't get lost in them, they navigate them. They analyze their emotions without drowning in them, which allows them to extract insight instead of anxiety. Overthinking narrows your world. It keeps your focus locked on the problem, not the solution. It makes small issues feel massive because your brain keeps looping the same thought until it becomes your reality. Deep thinking expands your world. It connects the dots between ideas, experiences, and possibilities. A deep thinker might face the same problem, but instead of spiraling into worry, they ask bigger questions. What can I learn from this? What patterns am I repeating? What truth is hiding behind this emotion? This shift from reaction to reflection changes everything. It turns pain into perspective and confusion into clarity. The difference also lies in time. Overthinking lives in the past or the future. It replays what already happened or imagines what might go wrong. It's mental time travel that leaves you disconnected from the present. Deep thinking lives in the now. It uses the present moment as a base to explore meaning. A deep thinker can revisit the past, but not to relive it. They revisit it to extract lessons. They can imagine the future, but not to stress about it. They do it to create a vision. Their thoughts move with intention. Emotionally, overthinking is chaotic. It feeds off uncertainty and creates mental noise. You can feel it physically, the tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, the loop of what-ifs that never ends. Deep thinking feels quieter. It might still be intense, but it's grounded. It's not noise, it's focus. A deep thinker can sit in silence for hours because they're not avoiding their thoughts, they're exploring them. They're comfortable in their own head because they've learned how to separate clarity from clutter. Deep thinkers understand that not every question has an answer, and not every answer brings peace. They don't think to escape discomfort. They think to face it. That's why they often seem calm even in chaos. Their mind has already walked through the fire. Overthinkers avoid the fire but keep feeling the heat. They keep circling around what they're afraid to face. The mind becomes its own battlefield and peace feels far away. A deep thinker's mindset also involves acceptance. They accept that uncertainty is part of life, that pain is part of growth, and that they can't control everything. This acceptance quiets the need to overanalyze. When you accept that life is unpredictable, you stop trying to solve it like a math problem. You start observing it like art, complex, imperfect, but meaningful. That shift transforms the same mental energy that causes overthinking into something creative, reflective, and empowering. Another difference between the two lies in perspective. Overthinking keeps you trapped in self-focus. What did I do wrong? What if I fail? What will people think? It's ego disguised as fear. Deep thinking expands the perspective beyond the self. Why do people react this way? What does this experience teach me about the world? How does this moment fit into the bigger picture? That broader awareness reduces anxiety because it moves you from being the center of every problem to being a participant in a larger system. Overthinking often comes from a lack of trust in oneself, trust in timing, trust in life. The mind that doesn't trust has to overanalyze to feel safe. Deep thinking comes from faith, not blind belief, but confidence in one's ability to handle whatever happens. That trust allows deep thinkers to explore complex ideas without getting consumed by them. They know that not everything needs immediate resolution. Some thoughts need to breathe. Some answers need time. That patience separates insight from obsession. The brain chemistry behind both processes is similar. The same neural pathways of analysis and reflection are active. But what determines whether those thoughts become destructive or constructive is emotional regulation. A deep thinker balances intellect with emotional intelligence. They can analyze logically while also feeling deeply. Overthinkers, however, often let emotion hijack analysis. Their logic becomes tinted by fear, insecurity, or regret. That's why overthinking feels heavy, because it's not just thinking, it's thinking under emotional pressure. Deep thinkers develop techniques to prevent that pressure from turning toxic. They meditate, journal, walk, create anything that allows thoughts to flow instead of pile up. They turn mental noise into expression. Overthinkers, on the other hand, often keep their thoughts locked inside. The mind becomes cluttered and the weight builds. Expression is the release valve that deep thinkers understand instinctively. It's how they turn reflection into growth. Both overthinkers and deep thinkers have powerful minds, but the key is mastery. Without direction, intelligence becomes overthinking. With awareness, it becomes wisdom. Deep thinkers train their minds to work for them, not against them. They question with purpose, not with panic. They explore their thoughts, but they know when to stop. They understand that the goal of thinking isn't to find every answer, but to find peace within the questions. The thin line that separates the two isn't about how much you think, but about why you think. Overthinking asks, what if I'm wrong? Deep thinking asks, what can I learn? One comes from fear of the unknown. The other comes from curiosity about it. When your mind starts running, that's the moment to check your intention. Are you searching for control or for clarity? The answer to that question determines whether your thoughts become a trap or a tool. Emotional depth is one of the defining qualities of deep thinkers. It's what gives their perspective richness, their empathy weight, and their creativity authenticity. People who think deeply don't just process information, they feel it on multiple levels. They can't skim through life the way others do, because everything hits them harder and stays with them longer. They don't just see events, they sense the layers beneath them, the emotion, the motive, the meaning. Their mind and heart work together like twin instruments, always tuned to the subtleties of life's rhythm. To outsiders, this can look like sensitivity or intensity, but to them, it's simply the truth vibrating at its natural frequency. Emotion for a deep thinker isn't a distraction from logic, it's a source of data. They don't run from feelings, they examine them. When sadness hits, they don't just feel it. They question where it comes from, what it's trying to teach them, and how it connects to something larger. That's what gives their emotions a sense of purpose. Most people try to escape uncomfortable feelings by numbing, denying, or replacing them with noise, but deep thinkers know that emotions are messages, and ignoring them only delays the lesson. They have learned to sit with their feelings long enough to decode them, even when it hurts. This emotional awareness often makes them empathetic. They can sense when someone's energy shifts, when someone's smile is forced, or when silence hides pain. It's not about mind reading, it's about emotional resonance. Because they've spent so much time analyzing their own feelings, they can recognize those same patterns in others. That empathy draws people toward them, friends, strangers, even broken souls, because being understood, that level feels rare, but it also drains them at times. Feeling deeply means absorbing energy that isn't always yours. It means carrying the weight of other people's emotions without always realizing it. For a deep thinker, protecting that emotional boundary becomes a constant act of balance. Emotionally deep people often experience life in high definition. Every moment has texture, every interaction carries weight. A song isn't just sound, it's memory. A look isn't just eye contact, it's connection. A loss isn't just pain, it's transformation. That sensitivity gives them an edge in art, writing, leadership, and relationships because they move through the world with emotional precision. But it also makes the world heavier. They can't detach easily from what they care about. When they love completely. When they lose, they grieve deeply. When they dream vividly. Their emotional range stretches from the darkest lows to the brightest highs, and both extremes teach them something valuable. Psychologically, this depth is tied to a highly active limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, combined with strong self-awareness from the prefrontal cortex. In simpler terms, they feel deeply and also reflect deeply about those feelings. That's a rare combination. Many people either feel without reflection or analyze without emotion. Deep thinkers merge both, turning raw emotion into insight. It's what allows them to extract beauty from pain and wisdom from heartbreak. They might not always know how to explain what they feel, but they know how to express it through words, art, silence, or action. One of the challenges of emotional depth is intensity. Deep thinkers don't experience feelings halfway. When something excites them, it consumes them. When something bothers them, it lingers. They can spend hours unpacking a single sentence or replaying a moment that others forget in minutes. This intensity can be overwhelming both for them and for people around them. But that's also what fuels their passion. Their emotions are not just reactions, they're engines. That's why many of the most visionary artists, leaders, and innovators throughout history were emotional deep thinkers. They use their sensitivity as fuel for creation understanding. Because deep thinkers feel so much, they often crave solitude. Silence becomes their sanctuary. In quiet moments, they can finally separate their emotions from the world's noise. They can process what's theirs and release what's not. They don't fear being alone because solitude gives them clarity. They reflect on their emotions, trace them to their roots, and translate them into something meaningful. A story, an idea, a goal, or even just a new layer of self-awareness. This inner work gives them emotional stability that seems calm on the outside, even when their inner world is in motion. Their emotional depth also influences how they connect with others. They don't do shallow relationships well. Small talk feels like static to them. They want conversations that cut through the surface, thoughts about purpose, pain, growth, and the hidden layers of life. They crave authenticity because their emotions demand honesty. They can sense when someone is pretending, when words don't match energy, when affection isn't genuine. That's why they might have fewer friends but stronger bonds. They value connection that feeds the soul, not the ego. At the same time, emotional depth can lead to loneliness. Not everyone understands that kind of intensity. Some people mistake it for drama or moodiness. Others feel uncomfortable around it because it reflects emotions they'd rather ignore in themselves. So deep thinkers learn to carry much of their inner world quietly. They become selective with what they share and with whom. They protect their emotional truth because they know not everyone can hold it with care. But even in isolation, they remain connected to humanity through empathy and understanding. They don't need crowds to feel compassion. Their heart sees the bigger picture, that everyone is fighting something invisible, that everyone feels deeply even if they hide it differently. Emotional depth also shapes their decision making. They don't just ask what's right or what's smart. They ask what feels aligned. They consider emotional consequences as much as practical ones. That doesn't mean they're ruled by feelings, but that they integrate them. They understand that logic without emotion is incomplete. They trust intuition because it's built on layers of experience, reflection, and emotional truth. When a deep thinker says something doesn't feel right, it's not a guess. It's their subconscious processing information that logic hasn't caught up to yet. Their emotional intelligence gives them resilience. While others may avoid discomfort, deep thinkers dive into it. They believe every emotion, even pain, has value. They understand that suffering carves space for compassion, that heartbreak teaches humility, and that vulnerability is strength. This doesn't mean they enjoy pain. It means they respect it. They know that emotional depth isn't just about feeling more. It's about understanding what those feelings reveal. Pain sharpens perspective. Joy reminds them of gratitude, and both together shape their emotional maturity. When deep thinkers face emotional turmoil, they turn inward instead of outward. They journal, reflect, meditate, create. They use emotional pain as raw material. What breaks others often builds them because they know how to transform emotion into growth. They don't see sadness as weakness or fear as failure. They see both as signals pointing toward healing. That's why emotional depth often leads to wisdom. Their experiences don't just pass through them, they evolve through them. At the core of emotional depth is honesty. Deep thinkers refuse to fake what they feel or suppress what's real just to fit in. They'd rather be misunderstood for their authenticity than accepted for their disguise. That honesty radiates through everything they do. The way they speak, love, create, and lead, it gives their presence a kind of gravity. People can sense that they mean what they say because their words come from lived emotion, not performance. Their depth isn't about sadness or sensitivity alone. It's about truth. They live emotionally awake in a world that often prefers to stay asleep. Vision beyond the surface is one of the most striking qualities of deep thinkers. It's the ability to look past what's obvious and sense the hidden layers underneath, the patterns, motives, and meanings that most people overlook. While many live by what they see, deep thinkers live by what they perceive. Their mind doesn't stop at appearance or immediate logic. It keeps digging, questioning, and connecting dots that others don't even notice. This ability gives them insight that feels almost prophetic at times. Like they can see the blueprint behind the moment, the system behind the behavior, the truth behind the illusion. It's not magic, it's the result of a mind that refuses to settle for surface level understanding. People with vision beyond the surface are natural questioners. They're not satisfied with, that's just how it is. They need to know why. From a psychological perspective, this comes from a combination of curiosity, pattern recognition, and abstract thinking. Their minds are wired to see relationships between ideas that don't seem related at first glance. Where most people see isolated events, deep thinkers see systems. They notice the connections between cause and effect, between emotion and action, between history and outcome. This ability allows them to anticipate things before they happen and understand people in ways that go beyond words. Seeing beyond the surface often begins with awareness. Deep thinkers notice the small details, the hesitation in a voice, the rhythm of a conversation, the contradiction in someone's story. But instead of judging those details, they analyze them. They understand that truth is often disguised, that what people show is rarely the full story. This mindset makes them both empathetic and cautious. They don't take things at face value, not because they're cynical, but because they know that life is layered. They've learned that behind every reaction there's a reason, and behind every pattern there's a story. That awareness turns them into observers of life, not just participants. When it comes to society, deep thinkers often see the patterns of the collective mind the way they see the patterns of their own. They can sense cultural cycles, how people follow trends, how fear shapes opinions, how systems reinforce behavior. This perspective can make them feel detached at times, like they're standing outside of the world looking in, but that distance gives them clarity. They can recognize manipulation, hypocrisy, and illusion in places where others see normality. That's why deep thinkers often challenge systems. They question media narratives, social expectations, political agendas, and even traditional definitions of success. Their vision isn't just mental, it's moral. They look beyond surface comfort to uncover deeper truths about fairness, integrity, and purpose. This ability to see deeper also extends to how they understand people. Deep thinkers can sense authenticity because they pay attention to consistency between words, energy, and action. They can tell when someone's confidence is masking insecurity, when kindness is driven by guilt, or when silence is louder than speech. This emotional perception isn't about judgment but understanding. They don't see people as good or bad, they see them as complex, shaped by experiences, trauma, and conditioning. That's why they often forgive easily but trust slowly. They see too much to pretend they don't. Vision beyond the surface makes deep thinkers natural problem solvers. When faced with challenges, they don't just react to symptoms, they look for root causes. They approach situations like puzzles, breaking them down piece by piece until the pattern emerges. They understand that fixing something without understanding it only leads to temporary peace. Whether it's in relationships, business, or self-growth, they look for the underlying truth, the real issue behind the visible one. That's what allows them to create lasting solutions instead of surface fixes. This way of thinking also gives them a unique kind of creativity because they can see connections others miss. They can combine ideas from different worlds, art with science, logic with emotion, technology with philosophy. They think in layers, and that layered vision often leads to innovation. Many great inventors, writers, and philosophers share this trait, the capacity to see what isn't there yet. They imagine possibilities that others can't visualize because they operate beyond the limits of current reality. Their ideas often feel ahead of their time because they emerge from insight, not imitation. But seeing beyond the surface also comes with challenges. When you see the truth behind appearances, it can make the world feel heavy. You notice manipulation in marketing, insincerity in relationships, injustice in systems, things that others overlook because it's easier not to see them. That awareness can turn into frustration or isolation. Deep thinkers sometimes struggle to find peace in a world that rewards ignorance over insight. They crave authenticity but often find performance. They want depth but are surrounded by distraction. That's why solitude becomes their refuge, a place where they can breathe freely, think clearly, and reconnect with what's real. This deeper vision also affects how they define success. They're less interested in surface symbols like fame, wealth, or status. Those things might attract them for a moment, but they lose meaning quickly if they lack purpose. Deep thinkers are drawn to impact, to the kind of success that leaves a trace on humanity. They think in terms of legacy, not luxury. They want their work, their words, their existence to add value, to awaken something in others. That's why they often feel restless doing things that don't align with their deeper purpose. Their mind keeps reminding them that the surface isn't enough. In relationships, this vision can make connection complicated. Deep thinkers crave partners who can meet them at that same level of awareness. They don't want shallow affection, they want shared depth. They want someone who asks questions that matter, who sees the invisible, who understands silence as much as speech. But such connections are rare, and when they don't find them, they'd rather stay alone than pretend. They'd rather have solitude with truth than company with pretense. Their emotional and intellectual standards come from that same inner vision that refuses to settle for surface comfort. Spiritually, seeing beyond the surface often leads to awakening. Deep thinkers question not just people and systems, but reality itself. They wonder about the nature of consciousness, the flow of time, the purpose of existence. They study patterns in human behavior the same way they study patterns in nature to find meaning. They believe there's more to life than what we see, and that belief guides their actions. This spiritual curiosity isn't always religious, it's intuitive. It's the sense that life is interconnected and that every event, no matter how small, is part of a larger design. At the core of this vision lies courage. It takes courage to see things as they are without flinching, to question traditions when it's easier to conform, to face uncomfortable truths without losing hope. Deep thinkers carry that courage quietly. They don't seek applause for their insight, they seek alignment with it. They keep their mind open and their heart grounded, walking through a world full of illusions while staying loyal to what's real. And that loyalty to truth, even when it isolates them, even when it costs them comfort, is what makes their vision so rare and powerful. Solitude as a tool is one of the most defining habits of deep thinkers. For most people, being alone feels like emptiness, but for someone who lives in deep reflection, solitude is space to breathe, to realign, and to understand. It's not isolation out of avoidance, it's separation for clarity. Deep thinkers retreat into silence the way a craftsman retreats into his workshop, not to escape the world, but to shape their understanding of it. In solitude, they find freedom from distraction, a kind of mental quiet that allows them to hear their own thoughts without the echo of other people's opinions. It becomes a ritual, a way to keep their inner world organized while the outer world stays chaotic. Psychologically, solitude provides what social noise can't, the ability to process experience without interruption. Deep thinkers naturally absorb a lot of emotions, details, meanings, contradictions. Their minds work like sponges, taking in everything around them, often without realizing it. If they stay too long in the crowd, their thoughts become tangled. They start carrying energy that isn't theirs. That's why solitude becomes essential. It's a cleansing process. Time alone helps them untangle their emotions, trace their thoughts back to their origins, and feel the truth from noise. In silence, they can analyze what they've learned, question what they believe, and strengthen what they know. To a deep thinker, solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the hunger for connection. Solitude is the fullness of self. When they are alone, they are not abandoned. They are accompanied by their thoughts, their curiosity, and their growth. This difference is what allows them to enjoy stillness without fear. They've learned that peace isn't found in people, it's found in presence. And presence requires space, mental, emotional, and physical. Solitude provides that space. It's where they recharge their emotional battery, sharpen their focus, and reconnect with their purpose. Many of the greatest thinkers, creators, and leaders throughout history have had deep relationships with solitude. It's not coincidence. Reflection needs quiet. The mind can't reach depth when it's constantly stimulated. Modern life encourages noise, endless conversations, scrolling, notifications, and entertainment. But noise keeps the mind on the surface. Deep thinkers resist that pull. They seek moments where there's nothing to react to, where they can let their mind wander freely. That wandering isn't aimless, it's exploration. Solitude gives them the creative space to connect ideas, imagine possibilities, and access insights that never appear in a crowded mind. Solitude also nurtures emotional maturity. When you spend time alone, you start noticing your patterns. You see how your mood changes, what triggers your anxiety, what brings you peace. Deep thinkers use solitude to study themselves in real time. They don't run from their flaws, they analyze them. They ask questions that others avoid. Why did that situation bother me? What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? That level of introspection brings emotional intelligence. They start understanding their needs without depending on others to define them. It also teaches them accountability. When you're alone, you can't project your emotions on anyone else. You have to face them. That's where growth happens. In solitude, deep thinkers also refine their sense of purpose. Without external voices shaping their goals, they can listen to the quieter voice within, the one that asks what really matters. They reflect on where they're going, whether their actions match their intentions, and whether they're living in alignment with their values. That kind of self-examination can't happen in crowds. It requires stillness. In that stillness, they reconnect with their why. Purpose becomes clearer because it's not competing with noise. They begin to see which parts of their life are distractions and which are direction. This clarity often leads them to make bold decisions, walking away from shallow pursuits, false relationships, or toxic environments, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. There's also a spiritual dimension to solitude. When you sit alone long enough, you start hearing things you couldn't before, not voices, but truth. You start feeling connected to something bigger, something unseen but undeniable. Deep thinkers often describe solitude as communion, not withdrawal. They feel closest to life itself when the world is quiet, nature silence, and stillness becomes sacred spaces where they can observe the rhythm of existence without interference. That connection deepens their empathy and humility. They begin to see that every person, every event, every moment is part of a larger pattern, and that understanding grounds them in gratitude. Solitude sharpens their creativity. The mind, when uninterrupted, starts weaving ideas together. Thoughts that seemed unrelated begin to connect in surprising ways. Solutions appear out of nowhere because the brain finally has room to think freely. Deep thinkers know that constant input kills originality. You can't discover your own voice if you're always listening to someone else's. That's why they often protect their alone time fiercely. They understand that every creative breakthrough, every new idea, every moment of insight is born in quiet. Solitude becomes the soul where inspiration grows. But solitude isn't always peaceful. It also brings confrontation. When everything around you goes silent, your inner world gets louder. You start hearing the thoughts you've been ignoring, the doubts you've been avoiding, the fears you've been suppressing. Deep thinkers know this well. They've faced those internal storms and come out wiser because of them. Solitude forces honesty. You can't distract yourself when no one's watching. You can't pretend you're fine when the only voice left is your own. That's why solitude, though sometimes uncomfortable, is profoundly cleansing. It strips away illusion and demands authenticity. Deep thinkers learn to balance solitude with connection. They understand that too much isolation can harden the heart. Reflection without interaction becomes stagnation. So they use solitude strategically as a rhythm, not a retreat. They step away to gather wisdom, then return to the world to apply it. Their strength lies in knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. They don't disappear out of resentment, but out of respect for their own mental space. And when they come back, they bring perspective that others can feel, calm, grounded, and insightful. Solitude also changes their relationship with time. When they're alone, hours lose urgency. They stop chasing the clock and start flowing with it. That presence opens their perception. They notice small details, the sound of wind, the texture of thought, the pattern of breath. This mindfulness brings peace that no crowd can give. It's not boredom, it's being. For a deep thinker, solitude turns from emptiness into awareness. It becomes the ground where peace grows, where creativity lives, and where purpose takes shape. In a world obsessed with constant connection, solitude becomes rebellion. It's choosing depth over distraction, presence over performance. Deep thinkers know that if they don't make space for silence, the world will fill it with noise. So they step back not to disconnect, but to reconnect with their thoughts, their truth, and their essence. Their solitude isn't an escape from life, it's how they return to it renewed, centered, and clear. A purpose-driven mindset is the core of how deep thinkers move through life. It's the force that gives direction to their thoughts, meaning to their actions, and structure to their dreams. For them, life isn't something to be drifted through. It's a mission to be understood, shaped, and fulfilled. Purpose becomes their inner compass, guiding their energy toward what truly matters instead of what merely distracts. They don't chase success for the sake of appearance. They chase alignment, the feeling that what they do, think, and create is part of something larger than themselves. That's what separates them from those who live on autopilot. Every step they take is deliberate, even when the path isn't clear, because their motivation comes from meaning, not validation. In psychology, a purpose-driven mindset is often linked to what's called self-determination theory, the idea that people find fulfillment when their actions are connected to intrinsic motivation rather than external reward. Deep thinkers embody this naturally. They aren't satisfied with temporary wins or superficial recognition. They're fueled by values, by the desire to grow, to contribute, to leave an imprint that lasts beyond them. Their focus isn't just on what they get from life, but on what they give to it. That's why they rarely find peace in shallow ambition. Achievements without meaning feel empty to them. They measure success in terms of impact, growth, and authenticity rather than numbers or applause. A purpose-driven mind operates from within. It asks deep questions before taking action. Does this align with my values? Will this create something that matters? Is this consistent with who I'm becoming? Deep thinkers use reflection as their navigation system. They don't rush into decisions just to keep up with the pace of others. They pause, think, and choose intentionally. This can make them seem slow or overly cautious in a fast world, but they're not chasing speed, they're chasing substance. Their patience isn't hesitation, it's precision. They know that every misaligned step takes them further from their purpose, so they choose carefully. The connection between purpose and resilience is another key part of their psychology. When life gets hard, people without purpose break easily because their motivation is external. But deep thinkers endure. They can face rejection, failure, and isolation without losing direction because their drive isn't based on circumstance. Purpose turns pain into fuel. When they fail, they don't just see loss, they see feedback. Every obstacle becomes data, every hardship becomes depth. They believe that struggle isn't punished as refinement. This mindset allows them to keep moving forward even when everything around them falls apart, because purpose gives meaning to the chaos. For deep thinkers, purpose isn't always tied to career or achievement. It's an internal principle, a way of living with intention. It shows up in the way they communicate, how they treat people, how they manage their time. They don't want to exist passively. Even small acts carry meaning. A conversation, a piece of writing, a moment of kindness, all become expressions of their greater mission. They understand that purpose isn't found, it's created, it's built through choices, reflections, and consistent alignment between thought and action. That's why deep thinkers often evolve their purpose over time. As their understanding grows, their direction shifts, but the underlying drive to live with meaning never fades. This mindset also influences how they deal with uncertainty. Most people fear the unknown because it threatens control. Deep thinkers, however, see uncertainty as part of the journey. They don't need to know every answer as long as they know their why. That sense of purpose gives them stability even when circumstances change. They navigate the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. They trust that as long as they stay aligned with their values, the next step will reveal itself. That's what gives them quiet confidence, not arrogance, but trust in their process. They know they're walking a path that's uniquely theirs, and they don't need external validation to stay on it. A purpose-driven mindset also affects how they handle relationships. They don't connect just for convenience or status. They seek depth and shared vision. They want to be around people who inspire growth, not people who distract from it. Their circle is small but intentional. They look for souls who understand mission, who value honesty, progress, and meaning. When they love with direction. They see relationships as collaboration, a shared evolution rather than an escape from loneliness. That's why they struggle in environments where connection is shallow or transactional. They crave conversations that build, partnerships that expand, and communities that transform. When it comes to work and creativity, purpose becomes their fuel. Deep thinkers don't create for attention, they create to express truth. They want their work to mean something, to spark thought, to move others emotionally or spiritually. This often puts them at odds with systems that reward speed and popularity over depth, but they'd rather take the long road than compromise their message. Their creativity grows from authenticity, not imitation. They believe that art, ideas, and innovation lose their power when disconnected from purpose. That's why their output often feels timeless. It carries energy that comes from intention. Purpose also keeps them humble. Deep thinkers know that their ideas and talents are tools, not trophies. They don't see themselves as better than others, just more aware of their role in the larger picture. They understand that purpose isn't about ego, it's about service. They want to use what they've been given, intellect, creativity, empathy, to contribute something of value. That's why they often mentor, teach, write, or lead quietly. Their fulfillment comes not from being seen, but from seeing others grow through their influence. Their satisfaction comes from impact, not recognition. Yet living with purpose isn't easy, it demands sacrifice. Deep thinkers often feel torn between what's easy and what's meaningful. The world pushes quick success while their soul demands slow integrity. This tension creates loneliness sometimes, the feeling of walking a path that few understand. But even in isolation, purpose gives them peace. They might question their direction at times, but they never question the need for direction. They know that drifting might bring comfort, but it never brings fulfillment. So they keep choosing alignment over approval, even when it costs them comfort. Purpose-driven living also gives them a unique sense of time. They don't measure life in years, but in progress. A day feels successful not because it was busy, but because it was meaningful. They prioritize moments that matter, learning something new, deepening a connection, creating something lasting. They live intentionally because they know that time is the only currency that can't be earned back. Every hour must serve something: growth, love, contribution, or rest. That awareness makes them mindful, efficient, and grounded. At the deepest level, a purpose-driven mindset transforms the way deep thinkers see existence itself. They believe that everyone is here for a reason, and discovering that reason is the real journey of life. It's not about what you have, but what you give. Not about where you arrive, but how you evolve. Purpose gives their days weight and their nights peace. It keeps them from getting lost in comparison or chaos because they know exactly what they're building and why it matters. In a world obsessed with surface success, deep thinkers stand out quietly, not for how much they do, but for how deeply they mean it. When we look at the psychology of people who are deep thinkers, what we really see is the power of awareness, emotion, vision, solitude, and purpose woven into one way of living. Deep thinkers are not just people who think a lot. They're people who feel deeply, question consistently, and they live intentionally. They carry a level of self-awareness that allows them to grow from pain, a balance between thought and emotion that gives them empathy, a vision that cuts through illusion, and a connection to solitude that keeps them centered. But above all, they move with purpose. Every idea, every action, every moment has meaning. Their depth isn't a burden, it's their brilliance. It's what allows them to see what others miss and build what others can't even imagine. So if you carry that depth inside you, don't run from it. Don't dim it to fit a shallow world. Protect it, nurture it, and let it guide you, because the world doesn't change through noise. It changes through reflection and sight. And those who have the courage to look beyond the surface. Your thoughts have value, your feelings have purpose, and your mind has the power to shape reality. Keep thinking, keep feeling, keep growing, but always remember to live through your thoughts, not just inside them. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for thinking with me today. May your mind stay sharp, your heart stay open, and your path stay aligned with your purpose. Good luck on your journey. May your depth never be misunderstood, and may your vision always lead you toward light.